Woo!
Welcome to Night Talks, the University of Florida College of Journalism and Communications talk show produced by students for you. I'm Maria Avlonitis, a junior student studying journalism, and our guest today is Heather McPherson, a food journalist that worked for the Orlando Sentinel and authored several cookbooks. She's currently public relations and media manager for Millennium Management Group. Hi, Heather.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. We're so glad to have you today. So I wanted to start off by asking you, you were born in Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. What was your path to Gainesville and studying journalism at UF?
Well, I have been on a school newspaper since the 8th grade, and we left Indianapolis, about the time Disney was building down here. My parents always wanted to retire in Florida, so they were like, pack up the kids and we're gonna go. And I became this over-the-top Floridian. I mean, when I got here, I thought I would never want to leave the Midwest. And I got here and just fell in love with it.
So how was your time at the CJC and the skills you honed here foundational to your career?
I cannot say enough how wonderful that they were. I had incredible professors. The classes were great, but also there's something very magical about the Gainesville community as well, about the things you can soak up here. I was an avid reader, as most journalists are and should be. I was an incredible fan of Marjorie Kinnan Rollins, and I'm actually on the board of trustees for the Marjorie Kinnan Rollins Society. And I had gone out to the house, and I wasn't quite sure where I was going to major. I knew that I always loved to write, and I started reading. There's a book out there, and you can read the letters between her and Max Perkins, her editor at Scribner. And I mean, my gosh, this man edited Thomas Wolfe. He edited Hemingway. He edited Marge, and it's sort of like I got the connection between an editor and a writer. And that's what made me push toward news ed as my major, and absolutely loved it. And I still carry those with me today. I actually mentor a couple students who are UF grads as well.
In 1978, you went to work for the Orlando Sentinel as a multimedia journalist. How did you land this opportunity, and what did your news and feature work consist of? Well,
that's kind of a funny story because my advice to all students is don't overplan your life because you never know when an opportunity is going to walk in the door. I was actually graduating, going through the placement service, and Gannett had made me an offer to choose between Fort Myers or Pensacola. I had interned at the Orlando Sentinel, and I walked in, not making this up, to buy a Nikon F back, which I know is like a really old Nikon camera, from one of the photographers that I knew when I interned. And I walked in, and apparently 2 copy editors had retired. I was a proven intern who could start to work right away. And Jim Squires, who was the editor at the time, became the Chicago Tribune's editor eventually, looked at me and said, do you have a job? And I went, yeah. It was one of these things. I'm holding a camera, giving someone a check, and he goes, when can you start? And I said, well, I have to graduate on Saturday or my parents are going to be really disappointed. So I said, I'll start in 2 weeks. So yeah, I initially had planned to take the Gannett route, ended up with the Tribune route. Some newspapers never changed their focus, but in 3 decades, I felt like I worked for 3 different newspapers because at the time I went to work for them, half of the newsroom was still doing hot type. We were on the ground beat cop kind of reporters. I mean, from everything that we did. If you look way back in my resume, I always say it's 3 words, cops to quiche. Started reading the police blotters, the actual blotter, not on your computer screen, in Seminole County, out of the Sanford office, and then worked my way into news features as a career move. Found my voice in food. Journalism was changing. Food journalism was changing. We had nutrition people were suddenly thankfully interested. I have to admit, when I was growing up, I kind of had this idea that all food editors wore gingham aprons, and they were making brownies in the test kitchen. And I was able to come up at a time when that was evolving. There was still a lot of cooking in the test kitchen. I had 3 test kitchens over the years at the Orlando Sentinel, and they were set up for filming. We had an agreement with a TV station, and so we did some live on-air filming from the test kitchen for holidays and stuff like that. And we had some columns that we converted into video as well. But people were wanting to know more. And for me as a writer, it's not every recipe, it's about the story. It's not really like, here's your ingredient list, 1, 2, 3, 4, what to do with it. Somewhere in there is an ingredient or the source of it that is a story that is really interesting. And that's why I love writing cookbooks, because people glam onto that story. It's not just the picture, and they go, oh my, I had no idea that the daddle pepper in Florida out of St. Augustine, is part of the slow food movement from Italy, because it is a specific thing to Florida. Just finding these stories to tell and meeting farmers and how these recipes were passed down. And also, food is an A1 story. So I was writing stories for A1, I was writing stories for B1, what have you. So I felt like I had, on the food beat, a taste of everything.
Could you tell me a little bit more about your approach to food journalism and how you were able to cook up fresh content over that period?
Well, there are people who get into this job and they go, oh my gosh, here comes Thanksgiving again. And I have to tell the same story about the turkey and everything. But you really have to understand there's a new fresh reader out there. There's someone coming of age. There's someone who's cooking their first dinner again. You realize you're helping people every day put food on the table. You're also helping them make sense of economy. One of the things that I think I brought to it as a reporter was we don't have to just do the Mardi Gras story. We started a series that we called Grocery Budget Makeovers, where we would send myself, another reporter, whoever, and we would send an economist in with them, and we would analyze what they shopped and talk and interview them like what you do. We were saving families, if they followed us, up to $3,000 a year. In the Midwest, you had to take home ec from the 4th and 5th grade. So I already knew how to cook. I just didn't know you could write about it and enlighten other people that, all those recipes are great. And I love the recipe. I cook all the time, but I think what I brought to it was a little bit of a newsy aspect with those grocery budget makeovers, and also more profiles of farmers. And there's always a new way to cook a turkey, no matter what anyone says.
In 2014, the Agriculture Institute of Florida honored your work on Florida farms, ranches, and fisheries. How impactful was your work to the agricultural sector?
I hope it was very impactful. There's a generation of children, actually, who really don't know where asparagus comes from, other than Publix or Fresh Market or whatever. And it's true. I mean, they really don't when you start with children. So one of the things that I wanted to do, and I've always done, I didn't seek the award. This is how I just wrote stories. It's like telling people what the Florida products were. Florida's this amazing market basket of things growing in the ground. And despite theme parks and despite roadways, these wonderful farms are still around everywhere. Continuing to tell those stories, I think what I really hope I did was raise awareness that they're out there, that people who've moved to Florida from elsewhere and think we're some sort of food desert, we're not. On the other side of that tree line is a centuries-old dairy operation. On the other side of this operation is a centuries-old beef cattle for beef, not just dairy. And in between, there is sweet corn and olive trees and all kinds of wonderful, wonderful things. Just lifting that up so that when you go in and you read the label or you see fresh from Florida, what does that mean? And in Florida, when we talk about local food, our food radius is actually 200 miles. So say from Gainesville, we are dipping into the Gulf, and then we're dipping into the Atlantic, and we're down below Lake Okeechobee. And we're all, almost up, we're up into Georgia from here, but, so you've got peanuts and watermelon, and it's endless to know what really comes from Florida. So I hope my impact was to educate. Florida has so many newcomers. It's sort of like, I would get a lot of phone calls. Well, we used to buy this when we lived up there, and trying to nicely embrace them to say, welcome to Florida, let me show you what we do have year round. 2 sweet corn seasons, all kinds of wonderful, you may not, okra I know can be a little bit, okra's really great if you know how to cook it right. And all of this stuff, just bringing that to the forefront.
And that's great because I think a lot of people mostly think of oranges when they think of Florida agriculture, but there's so much more to it.
In fact, we have so much more than, than citrus even more, unfortunately, because of freezes. And the one crop that has taken off like crazy are blueberries. When I first started covering food, the state of Florida was actually represented by the state of Michigan for promotion and marketing because Michigan wanted our blueberries out in the market to LA and New York and San Francisco, to all the big dining places, so that when their blueberries hit the market, they were ready to go. Well, what did we find out about high bush blueberries? They loved dry, sandy soil. Not a lot of things like dry, sandy soil, but that's where all the freezes were around Lake County and other places. And now blueberries is a multi-million-dollar business in the state of Florida, and we're growing peaches. It's interesting where they think, oh, well, they're done. Florida isn't done, and I actually credit UF for a lot of the reasons why we're not done. I've worked a lot with the Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences over my career, and there is some amazing research coming out of UF. We're doing, that's the only reason why Florida's got vanilla right now in South Florida is because of right here in Gainesville.
You worked for the Orlando Sentinel for 38 years. What was it about this organization that motivated you to stay for so much of your career?
Well, like I mentioned before, I felt like I worked for 3 different newspapers because I got to see this change in journalism from what traditional print was thought to be, and then print absorbed broadcast, and we absorbed radio. So I was doing multiple things under this one roof, and then we became almost our own news gathering network, because the Tribune Company, we would write stories over the years. We would coordinate with all the food editors, from the Chicago Tribune to the Hartford Courant to Newsday to whatever. The food editors would meet, as would the sports department, and we would say, hey, how can we share resources? It was a long time to stay, wasn't it? And sometimes when I look back, I try to remind everyone, 10 of those were in news, but yeah, almost 30. I left at a time when there were more buyouts on the table. And I also had this question that kept reoccurring in my head, because I don't feel old. I don't feel like I'm done. Not in any way. And I keep going, is there something else? Is there something else to do? And everyone should say that to themselves, at no matter where you think you are on your trajectory. Keep saying, is there something else I can do with my skill set? I was considering the buyout, and I got a phone call from a celebrity chef, Chef Art Smith, who was Oprah's personal chef for 10 years. He was going to open a restaurant at Disney Springs. He goes, I need help. I'm opening up a restaurant. I need for you to where I said, Art, I don't know anything about opening restaurants. I'm a writer. I said, you don't need me. I don't know who you need. But he goes, no. He's a 6th generation Floridian from Jasper in Hamilton County. Honey, I think I've forgotten all Florida seasons. And if you don't come on board and help me as I'm writing this menu, he goes, I'm going to embarrass my mama. And here's a 60-year-old man telling me, I'm going to embarrass my mama and you've got to come on board. And there was a buyout on the table. I went ahead and put in for it. And I walked into this new world that I knew nothing about. And I said, you know what? I have a skill set. I think I have something to offer. You need to scare yourself. There's something I actually keep behind my desk, and that Eleanor Roosevelt quote that everyone should have by your desk: do something every day that scares you. I absolutely love it. I stayed with them. I helped them open up Homecoming. I didn't really have a plan past that, but this is why you have to keep your eyes open and your ears open and your possibilities open. At the end we opened up Homecoming July 12th, and the owners came to me. They called me, and I thought it was going to be a thank you and goodbye. We appreciate your service. And we called me into the conference room, and it turned out to be, would you ever consider staying? And I was like, seriously? And they said, yeah, you're kind of like family now. And this company that I work for is very family oriented. I know all the wives, husbands, kids. I've been to baby showers, weddings, and I went home and talked to my husband about it, and he goes, You've always had a good intuition about these changes. So I did. I stayed on with Millennium, and we have 3 restaurants at Disney Springs. We have 3 in Anaheim at Disneyland. We're building 2 more this year in Anaheim at Disneyland. We own 3 restaurants and 2 containers at Sparkman Wharf in Tampa. And we have 2 bars in South Florida. Lulu's Bait Shop, which I'm sure some of you know, where the drinks come out in fish bowls, and right on Fort Lauderdale Beach. And then also we own the original Fat Tuesdays on Duval Street in Key West. We also work with a Michelin-starred chef, and that's one of our new Anaheim restaurants, and then he consults with some other stuff that we've done. So it was a great move. I didn't know I would pull in all those skills and all those contacts that I had. I thought I was opening up one restaurant, and it would look really strange on my resume. She just opened a restaurant. Can you do that?
Could you tell me a little bit about what are some of the biggest challenges these restaurants and entertainment complexes you work with face, and how do you impact these obstacles?
The biggest challenges right now they are facing is cost of goods. And this is something I've really learned from the accountants in the business. I mean, people are shocked. People just, when it's not just when eggs and the whole avian flu happened and when the price of eggs went up, poultry went up too because of avian. Homecoming is primarily a fried chicken restaurant. That's going to impact our menu quite a bit. And we also serve a lot of people on Disney property. So learning the economics has been really interesting, how to convey that value to our guests when they come in. Our servings are really big. We make sure our sides are really big, our proteins are really big. We don't mind if you share plates at all, but making sure they get that value for the amount charged. And that was where I thought me and the accountants would never have that much in common. But they do. They've educated me on, my goodness, why did this go up? Why did this go up? Right now you'd never know about tariffs and what's going on and stuff. So just, what is coming in, who's buying it, who's buying all of it, is there enough to share? I've learned a lot. I've been able to communicate that now to our guests as well, and work with Disney on that too. We now have a activation at Disney Springs called Flavors of Florida, and we're working with the Fresh from Florida people. Of course, Chef Art comes in for it, and just celebrating. With my contacts over the years doing the cookbooks, we were the only restaurant that brought in real farmers.
For about 2.5 years, you were also co-host with Jim Colbert on Primetime Kitchen on iHeartMedia's Real Radio 104.1. Tell us about your time on this radio show/podcast.
It was so much fun. It's just like sitting around with your friends talking about food, like a great podcast are. Whatever the subject is, and you're having fun and you're laughing. Jim he's a major host on iHeartRadio in Orlando, but a passionate foodie too. And he wanted to do this show, and he called me. And I did it while I was still working the Sentinel, and then I did it post Sentinel as well. And we had such a great time doing that show. They've since absorbed it into the show that he does every day on 104.1 in Orlando. Radio is so much fun because I had done radio over the years, believe it or not, with a lot of the rock stations, because everybody wants the food person to come on during the holidays. Get me through Thanksgiving. What do we need to know now? When do we have to thaw that bird? Get me through the holidays, whatever. Tips and tricks, all that kind of stuff. So I had done a lot of that. With Jim, we laughed so hard, and we would have chefs come on as guests, and we had farmers come on, and we would promote food festivals and what have you. So that was great, and I love it. Radio next to writing, I could do radio in a heartbeat. It's very intimate, even though you don't get to really see the other person. But I think the conversation becomes very intimate across the table from each other.
So you've authored 4 cookbooks, co-written 5 others, and edited 3 cookbooks. What's your process for creating recipes and cookbooks?
I am always creating recipes. I am always writing down. I have Post-it notes like galore in my kitchen, at my work desk. I'll get inspired by something. And so I always have tons of recipes going. I love Florida food, and I love Florida farmers. My dear friend Pam Brandon, who is the former editor of Edible Orlando and also the author of 40 Disney cookbooks. She and I and her daughter Katie, a UF graduate, Katie Farmand, we wrote a cookbook called Good Catch, captivating all the Florida waterways all the way around the coast. And we did Field to Feast. We're going to revise Field to Feast with UPress of Florida, and we're real excited about doing that. But we're just always, we can't help ourselves. It's like potato chips. It's like, here's another recipe. I can't stop. So I think if something is authentic in your blood, like say you cover sports, you're just always up on those stats. You're always up on that industry. And for me in food, it's always what's new. How I approach recipes is the same way I told you I approach food writing. A recipe has to tell a story. I can come up with thousands of recipes to fill a cookbook, but if there's not a story in it, you won't use it.
In 2019, you received the Beacon Award by the Food Service Council for Women and the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association, which is awarded for exemplifying leadership and inspiration. What did it mean to receive that accolade?
I tell you what, that one really blindsided me because I got the call from the Florida Restaurant Association, and I have to admit, I was like, did they get the right person? Did they really get the right person? But I think I have tried to mentor. You have to collaborate. You have to be part of a team. If you set out on this path, we're communicators in journalism. It takes a team to communicate. I don't think you get that far. You have to appreciate your director, your writer, your everything about it, and your editor, everything that goes on, you have to appreciate. When they told me what the award was about, I cried. It was like, it meant a lot to me. It wasn't something I sought. Lifting people up is not a hard thing to do, and which is basically was my acceptance speech. I found with mentoring and with even the career choices I've made, even staying as long as I did with Tribune, making those contacts and working those contacts. And by working, it's sort of like working a friendship. You've got friends who, you don't see for a couple months and you pick right up or whatever. That's because you've worked that friendship to be like in a really great space. Working those contacts, always taking that moment to say hello. You're going to end up doing some story, wanting to host some show, and you go, oh, no, I've got the B person. I've got the person to talk about this. Florida's on fire. What are we going to do? When Florida was on fire I didn't go look at the ranchers. I actually found the bee people. Where bees, we need bees for food. I found all the big apiaries. Nobody was doing that story. But making those contacts and have people call you right back, it is important. 9/11, at that time, most of the big food agencies were in Manhattan. As long as Con Ed kept the phone lines up, I was on the phone with all my food contacts in Manhattan. They were leaning out windows, giving us color pieces for our stories and writing. Keep up your contacts. You never know when you're going to need those in a story or be called on in a newsroom. We all have beats. We all have that passion, but sometimes you're going to work a story that's much bigger than you. And that was a clear example when you want to be part of the news and you want to be part of the transparency and you want to be, like, oh, you can go home, we'll finish it now. No. You want to be the person who they go, you know what you could do for us? I don't think I ever turned down anything. I wanted to be there on do you need someone else to do the phones on election night? I'll be there. It always is good to show that you care, be part of the newsroom. I think it's important.
You also previously served as president of the Association of Food Journalists. What is the value of professional organizations like AFJ, and what inspired your involvement?
I knew other members, and to show you my career, that group was originally called the Newspaper Food Editors Association, NFEWA, and when I was president of that group, things were changing. We had magazines and broadcast. Southern Living wanted to be a member, Better Homes and Gardens wanted to be a member. We had a very strict code of ethics with the newspaper group, and we weren't sure that we could let all these people in and still uphold our we pay for everything mentality when it comes to journalism. But we did realize what was happening in the media world. So we changed our name when I was president to the Association of Food Journalists, and they were so thrilled to join us because we were traditional journalists and they wanted that professionalism of the ethics that newspaper food journalists had, which we loved, they loved. I think it made them better journalists as well. I think it's like going to church. Fellowship is a hell of a thing, hanging with your peers, whether it's a broadcast group, if you're on the PR track, PRSSA, hanging with peers who are going through similar situations is the best way to grow. I mean, you may just have this, hey, I've done it since I started doing public relations and media, called up a few of my friends who've been doing it longer to say, hey, I got a situation. What would you do? Again, contacts and nurturing them and keeping them along. But a professional organization makes it so easy because you probably have a directory online. What did the James Beard Foundation do about this? I think it's essential. You can't be a lone wolf. Again, it's the team.
What advice would you offer students wanting to get into food journalism?
Learn to write, not to cook. The cooking thing was sort of a natural with me, but if you can't write a script or an article, you're not going to do anything about it. Learn to write first. And I really felt like I was fortunate that I did news ed and I covered news before I came into features and found my voice. When I came into features as, basically the traffic cop, when you come in as copy chief. And so I'm getting travel editor stories and I'm getting the food section stories. I'm getting all of this. And I remember our food editor, Dorothy Chapman, who had been food editor for a bazillion years. I'm not making that up. I think she just sort of came in with the hot type and stayed there. When Dorothy became ill and left, and I went up to say, I want this job, I had editors, graduate editors from here who said, no, you're on this track to go here. I went, no, I found my voice. And they gave me a 2-week cooling off. They said, okay, we want you to think about it for 2 weeks, because once you make this decision, they don't like to change your food editors quite a bit because they really get in touch with the readers, and readers do glam onto you. I said, I know, and I know this town, and I know this community, and I know what you want. I know what Dorothy gave you, but I know what the future has to give us. And so after 2 weeks, they gave me the job. I thought that was really funny. But know yourself. Don't let anyone else make up your career track. You are in charge of it. Hone those skills, find your voice, and collaborate. I did, and it's paid off well for me. And I always tell people, if I had set out to do this, I would have messed it up big time.
Thank you so much, Heather, for your insight. It has been so great about learning about the importance of contacts, creating those, and not being afraid to pivot in your career. And thank you to our viewers for joining us. Until next time, good night.